My name's Ian Howells, and what I'd like to talk about today is how you build a content management system on Couchbase. So Razmik and I are the co-founders, and we spent our earlier lives working in the relational database industry. We spent 20 years building content management companies on top of relational databases, people like Documentum and Alfresco. And if you really look back at the last 20 years and you ask yourself each year, could I do something radically better, faster, and cheaper? The fact is you probably couldn't. You could affect one of those variables, maybe make it a bit cheaper, but you couldn't change the world. What was different about now and the last probably 12, 18 months is the opportunity we saw, is if you say I'm going to focus on the cloud, make cloud first. The system is designed to be best on the cloud, make it mobile first, and make it analytics first. You can produce something that's an order of magnitude better. And that's really what this presentation is about. Okay, so the agenda, I'm going to talk about a little bit about the company, a bit about what we mean by mobile first, cloud first, and analytics first. Talk about if you really want to do that, you have different levels of performance. Because the real issue around traditional systems is people don't use them. So your performance requirements are pretty low. Then look at the benchmark we did. Then look at how you can get early access to the beta program for Samba Cloud. In the middle of it, I'll do a demonstration to show what I mean by changing the way people use content management. And after that, you'll see why we did a benchmark. So this is the two of us. As I said, we've spent 20 years building some of the most successful content management systems, and we really did believe that you could do something that was an order of magnitude better and faster and cheaper. And if you look at what we mean by content, this is what people buy enterprise content management systems for. This is a $5 billion industry. And if you think about the next time you get on a plane, you kind of would like the manual to be correct for the plane. And if you think about a salary review, you probably don't want everybody to see that in the whole company. If you're doing a multi-million-dollar bid and proposal, it better be right. That's the kind of content that we're talking about. And you look at the characteristics of it. It's typically a package of content. You think about this event today, we had a press release, we had logos, we had plans. It's very rarely an individual single piece of content. If you're going to do something like this, you tend to go through draft, review, and approval through a workflow. And the workflow makes sure that you can't publish something that's not approved, because you lose your job for that. Planes crash because of that. And typically, traditionally, you've had internal people working around tasks, and you have to audit everything you did. So when we did this financial press release at JP Morgan, who approved it? Who said that number was right? Those kind of things make or break your career, and that's what content management systems do. And you think about when you share it, you tend to be sharing in Office documents, internal static content. If you ever try to share something like a YouTube channel in a traditional system that's about your competitor that's fantastic, hopeless. You look at how it's organized, files and folders, Office documents typically. People tend to use it inside the office on a PC. And this was the world. And you look at, for the last 20 years how people have built systems, it's like this. You have a Windows machine, you have a content management system with workflow, and you audit everything that's done, and you build it on a relational database, you build it on a file system and a full text system. And that's really what most systems are built with, very little variation on that. And that was designed in 1990. And that's really stood the test of time because it was good enough until these changes that we talked about. And that's one multi-vendor approach. This is SharePoint. Wall-to-wall Microsoft where it runs better in IE. You have a SharePoint server, got a SQL Server, Windows. And it's interesting just doing this. SharePoint by itself is one of the fastest growing companies ever, if it was a company. This is a $2 billion company by itself. Now, you kind of look, it's interesting. So this is a really, really successful market, really successful product. And you look at how people use it. They tend to use it like a bunch of files and folders. And I used to joke about people's reaction. I was used SharePoint in my last company, and this is how people use it. It really is the one-visit syndrome. So there's two things people hate about SharePoint. If I'm going to work on a project, I was a marketing guy working on a project. I had press releases, I had collateral, I had multiple people. I used to use Excel to do the tasks and say, give them status. I couldn't use SharePoint. And if somebody wanted somebody to review it, I used email. And then we put it back into SharePoint. So SharePoint was pretty much a dumb repository. The other reason we talked about the one-visit syndrome, you think about if you're in a tech company, you always have a competitive analysis folder. And you've got this single Word document about competitive analysis. People go there once and never again. It's completely out of date. And there's this whole thing going on in the external world about a press release about your competitor, this phenomenal video about it, and it's never managed within SharePoint. That's when you get Google alerts and you send emails around and say, what are we doing? And then the response to what are we doing is, here's a Word attachment. So you don't use content management to manage fundamental content to your business. So we believe all of that should be managed by a system. And to get away from this kind of reaction to SharePoint, nobody comes into work and says, I'm looking forward to using SharePoint. Nobody, when they're traveling, says, I must get on that Wi-Fi, go through VPN, log into SharePoint to make my meeting better. But people do with these kind of apps. If you have 10 minutes, you go and flip through Flipboard, or you use Evernote. Now, we wanted to give this kind of, I love my app, to content management from the consumer world. So you think about what you want to have. If you're working on a project, wouldn't it be great if you had like a playbook like in American football? So you just do some plays. This is the marketing launch play. This is the plan and event play. And we're software guys. And people will work on agile projects, not waterfall methods. Wouldn't it be great if I could have a content project that was as agile as my code project, but also with the control that you have to have in these industries so you can't publish a press release that's not approved, for example. And wouldn't it be great if instead of just sharing Office documents, I could share absolutely anything I find that's useful for me and my team? That might be, as I said, a press release, or it might be a dynamic video, or it might be a whole channel. Just put that in the system to share with everybody within my team. And wouldn't it be great if I could organize in an engaging way, just like the speaker from McGraw-Hill said? So I can have a topic around NoSQL, and I can put Couchbase in there, NoSQL News in there, and I can look at it in as engaging a way as Flipboard. So those are the metaphors we want to bring to get great systems so that people should love using their content management system and actually find it useful. So I'm going to go into a demo in a second now, but this is kind of what we're talking about. Projects. This is think Asana. This is the centerpiece of what we're really focusing upon, where you work in a team with all the information you need to do your job. So the whole goal of this system is it's one place to get work done. Everything I need is here, all the people I need to work are here as well. And here, think Flipboard. So I can publish to Flipboard or organize around channels in this kind of environment. And as you saw in Dipti's presentation, Couchbase are using it, I should be able to pin anything. So we have a bookmark called Samba Pin It. So anything I find that's useful, I can pin into the system. So this is something we built as an example with using Couchbase. And what I'm going to do now is an example, kind of more realistic, that we built around financial services. Hey, so I'm going to have to look behind me now. And luckily, I'm not going to use this for very much because I'm going to go to an iPad. Because 90% of this demonstration is going to be in the iPad, because if you make it mobile first, this shouldn't be a second-class citizen that I can't use. So this is something we built, and it's just anonymous names. It's not implying any of these are customers. You think about if I'm working financial services, and I'm a digital marketing manager. So you think about this. These campaigns don't happen randomly. If you put the wrong interest rate out there, you've got a major problem. If you use unapproved legal text, you've got a major problem. So what we want to be able to do is to do this kind of structure. So what I'm able to do is, if people in legal update the words that I can use in a campaign, I should just know about that. You look at typically how we have to do this today. I have to go to SharePoint /legal/approved words, blah, blah. And then for the pricing the number to a different folder structure, that content should find me as opposed to me having to find that content. So what we're doing here is I can have the legal people can update any of the legal guidelines. It goes to a channel here so everybody can see it, but more importantly is I have these templates for campaigns that automatically suck in all the latest data, latest approved words that I can use. So if we look at this, it makes it very easy to have a way to have all the latest content with all the latest approved terminology, all the latest process that I have to go through, so I know I'm always going through the right thing. So whenever I kick off a new project, I use this template to do a double cashback campaign. And this has pulled in all that content that I saw from the template, which is always up to date. It's pulled in all of the tasks that are always correct. And all I have to do is really bring in the team of people, and we will privately work on this project. Then I allocate the people here. I'm going to have some marketing people who are internal, some creative people who are internal, some legal people who are internal, and an external agency. And we allocate to these tasks, the people that I brought into the team. So we think about what I'm able to do now. I'm able to just do pretty regular things that are pretty mandatory in this kind of environment. I may have some pricing and terms. And let's go through that. And I can do taglines, I can look at information. But you think about what's really going to happen in this kind of environment? I may have a 6-week campaign, and in the middle of this, something pretty realistic. The competitor has this video.
My name, Peggy. You got problem? Hey.
So that's a video now. We think about that whole campaign. If that's going viral, we say we've got to change our campaign to focus on customer service in the USA. How do I do that? Normally you do that through email. So we want to be able to say, I just want to be able to go in and I want to say pin that, and then it's going to take that project, this video, and it's going to, if you can see it here, I've got the screen here. And I just pin it into the project. Double cashback campaign. Now that's part of the project. So when I go back into the Samba Cloud, and I do a refresh, and I go back in, that content's now there. It's automatically been discovered, and people can say, we need to change our campaign. We need to add a task to update what we're going to do and focus on a tagline that focuses on US support. Now, what I'm going to do now is flip over to the iPad, so I don't have to keep looking backwards. So the whole goal we had was to say, this iPad should be a fully functioning system that can do everything you're going to do on the Mac. So it's not just like something you can view things when you're traveling, it's something as a true tool to work with. So when it comes up, we'll see that all that data is exactly the same in real-time updates, and when I go into that double cashback campaign, and I look at the content in here, I see what I've just added in real time, which is the Peggy campaign video. There we go. So we can see there. Now, so we've got one repository for any content we need to do this, and I can say we should add a task to reflect what we're doing, that we're going to focus on US customer support. And what we're going to do here is to make it better on an iPad. Add a new tagline about customer support. So it's done that. Then I'm going to take that related content, I'm going to do the Discover Peggy campaign. I'm going to add it to Ian, make it myself, and then give it a due date of today because it's really important. So I'll be able to dynamically update my campaign, and then we can kick off where people can work on that. Then we can go and look at specific work orders, and I can not only review documents live in this, I can comment on them, I can annotate them, I can approve tasks. And I can say, approved by Ian. So I can take it through the whole draft review approval process and make it as easy to do as an agile project, but I'm going to give you the controls, and I can, not for the demo's sake, but I can say that you can only publish after the review and approval have all been completed. So I'm going to say, publish to channel. And what I'm also able to do is to say, I want to publish this Chase Freedom campaign to Chase Today and Chase Digital Marketing. And we spoke to one of our customers, and they were saying, you know, I run these multi-million-dollar campaigns, and I end up publishing to SharePoint. None of the sales guys read it, so I publish it to an internal shared file drive, because some people use that. And I publish it to Dropbox externally, because some other people use that. And then my website, and you know, I always remember to miss one of them, so they're always inconsistent. So this will allow you to do publishing to whatever channel you want in a single click, and the system can automate that, so it always remembers these are the right 2 channels. Now when we go out here, let's go back to Samba Cloud. What we've seen here is we've worked within a project with the controls that you need with this environment. We've been able to publish to Chase Today, and that content was published there, so it's always up to date, and it's always approved and reviewed and approved and published out. And not only do we publish the campaign, we looked at, let's find all the blog posts, RSS feeds, news feeds, LinkedIn feeds, Twitter feeds, and YouTube feeds that are related to this campaign, and aggregate them. So in one place, if we're looking at competitors, for example, we have all the news about our competitors and the content to say how to compete against them, to aggregate all of that together. So that's a quick way of looking at what we're doing here. I'm going to flip back to my Mac now. So when we look at what we're doing there, one of the core things is, when we've spoken to people, it's like one place to get work done. So the whole throughput requirements are much higher because A, people use it, and you're not just casually updating documents every few months, you're continually updating, information from many, many different sources all the time. So if we go back to that PowerPoint, what we had here was the whole concept of projects, which is the centerpiece. Then you publish to channels, and you can share anything through Pinit. So when we think about that kind of application, what we believed was important was to redesign the way you created content management systems, because a traditional content management system couldn't handle that. It would just die. And we know they could die because when you do audit control, when you audit things that happen, the performance goes lower and lower as you do more and more auditing. And we're doing auditing on steroids here through analytics. So what we believed was important was to have a system that used NoSQL with cloud storage, integrated Elasticsearch, and Hadoop. Those are the core components that we used. And then we had a whole bunch of services with the REST API on top, where you did work, you worked in a project, and you could share any content from any source. You could organize it in channels, so I could have a competitive channel that would have YouTube and Word documents that would just, it's a topic that I care about, and present it in a flipboard-like metaphor and do analytics. And the other important thing is, you can access these through REST APIs, and then we have a HTML5 interface that works, as you saw, across any platform. The other important thing is, you look at the last 20 years, there's hundreds of terabytes of data and content stored in Documentums and SharePoint. You can't replace them. You've got to complement them. So we present ourselves as a front end to Documentum, not a replacement to Documentum. So we should be able to, for example, get some marketing information out of SharePoint, a contract out of Documentum, work upon it completely in private isolation, and maybe publish it out to Dropbox. That's the way you add value to the existing systems that you've got, and that's exactly what we do here. So that's the architecture that we have to do the kind of app that we just saw with me looking backwards. And this is a benchmark we ran this week. Now, this was kind of interesting because I spent a whole bunch of years doing benchmarks, and you normally have to contact a hardware vendor, book their most expensive machine 3 months out. You get an operating system specialist. You say you've got to configure the file system this way. You get a database specialist. You get a content management specialist. And then you spend months doing it because something doesn't work. You go back to engineering and change it. That's just the way it is. And it's, So we got the beta on Tuesday and did this benchmark on Wednesday with one person. So what we had were two C1X large Amazon machines, which are commodity hardware. We had an app server here, which is Jetty, going to Couchbase in the back end using Ubuntu 10.4. And we just did some simple, intensive write tests and read tests. And as I said this morning, content management isn't just like putting a blob in a database. You're going to have a piece of content that's versioned. You're going to have metadata, and it may change by version. If I go through a review cycle, people comment on it, and the comment belongs to a particular version. Then I have a state of a document. This is a review, not an approved document. So I have a workflow associated with it as well. See, just one document causes a massive amount of hits on a database, which is why traditional relational databases struggle. So when we do a write, the simple stuff we were doing was looking at the document metadata, the version metadata, the content, and the secondary indexes. For the read, we were looking at reading the document metadata and all the version metadata. And we did two things. We did a 2 system and a 4 system. So if things are correct, we get twice the throughput and the same response time. And what's interesting was we just ran it pretty much out of the box. So what we were getting was when we added an asset to the library with 10 threads or 20 threads, we got 65 to 70 transactions per second to add the asset. That's pretty good. This is on just an out-of-the-box piece of Amazon hardware. And we're putting real content in there, not small rows. And then the mean response time for adding an asset was about 145 milliseconds. Now you look at these systems, they tend to be very read-intensive. So the read numbers are really important because people tend to browse around, read something, and then a smaller number of people actually update documents. So you look at the get asset, we were getting 280 transactions per second. This is without trying. We were getting a mean response time of about 34 milliseconds. And then we were hitting about just under 5,000 ops per second on the Couchbase system. So what's kind of interesting is when we did an add asset, we were getting about 5,270 ops per second. So it was just under 5 or just above 5 ops per second. So then we thought, right, let's do this. Let's go from this to this. And what was amazing, we got completely linear scalability for reads and writes. The double throughput was almost to the right digit. We doubled the transactions per second to 560 and 140, The mean response time was almost identical for both reads and writes. Now these numbers are amazing. If you've worked in this industry, these are amazing numbers. You go through pain and suffering and all-nighters to get this with teams of people. We did it a day. And we believe we can go to 10 machines with no problem whatsoever. So we should be able to go 1, 2, 5, 10 and get 5 times and 10 times the throughput. Because it was just out of the box working. There was no tuning of buffers or tuning the op file system. And when we look at the ops, it was pretty much just under 10K. So the scalability and the linear scalability with the same mean response time was really, really easy. So this is kind of just from what I think was just as impressive is, this is typical life when you're doing that kind of thing. That's Ara there. He doesn't look tired. It took him 3 hours to do this. And that's a big deal. Ara has karma. So when we look at what we did, just to wrap up, it's content management by their nature, and it's the same. In the web you have some people write, a larger number of people comment, and most people read. So you want to be awesome at reads. It's a read mostly application. And between the team of us, we've got a whole bunch of database experience and memcached experience. So we chose Couchbase because we wanted to get memcached kind of performance for caching, and one system for caching in the database. We wanted to get performance that we just spoke about, but simple scale out and simple elasticity. We didn't want to have a whole team working 24/7 to make this work, which is typically what you're going to have to do for this environment. We wanted to be able to get performance and persistence. We wanted to have the options of a content and attribute store. We know that we're going to do some recommendations later, so audit is actually important. So audit trails is the first thing for high value, first step before you start doing high volume analytics. So we think about what we look at those channels. You know, if I have a really nice topic channel around NoSQL, Raz makes usually something different to me because his profile and what he likes may be different to me. So you want to add a Pandora-like feel to those kind of channels. And having a schemaless map for the CMIS model. CMIS is the standard for content management. If you're not using that, you're working in a completely proprietary way and can't integrate with anything else. And also we've got great support from Samba, from Couchbase. So this is available. We went into public beta today. We've been working with some very, very big companies in private beta up until today. You can register to try the product in a public beta by going to sambacloud.com, and then we've got couchconf.html. You can also email me at ian.howells@sambacloud.com, and then you'll be able to get access to try the system. So that's what we built, and I want to open it now for any questions that you've got. And we've got the engineers that work for Samba Cloud here as well. So what we have is a REST-based interface to access the service layer, and then beneath that we operate through CMIS to underlying systems. Okay. And we're a CMIS repo. So think of us as a CMIS repo that can sit next to a Documentum. That's a CMIS repo or a SharePoint with also extended other data. We put a layer of services on top of that with a REST API into those services that you can display in a HTML5 app. Okay. So there's two things. The question was, where do we store the content? So if you look at the key thing about a document, there's metadata and content, two things. So we use Couchbase. Originally we used Couchbase for both metadata and content. And now we've put the content into, in this case, S3 for getting encryption. But you kind of, in the long term, you potentially will need both options. So I think when Razmik was at Documentum, we did a load of benchmarks. And if you think in that industry, you have very big videos, you have small HTML fragments. So you need the option of storing small fragments potentially in the database and big things outside of the database. So in the reality, you need both. You get encryption if you store externally. And you do get different performance profiles for different types of data.
You can't use a single storage model. That's volume.
So the other thing, sorry, I forgot to mention that benchmark. The bottleneck was the network latency.
Right.
So we can get way more than that. So if you look at the traditional way of doing that on a dedicated machine, we'd have significantly high. Those numbers were great. We'd go toe-to-toe with anybody on those, and we could go way faster on a normal machine.
Is this only available in the up layers, or when you're providing, we set up our own instances internally with the back end and front end and everything? Today it's available as a hosted environment on Amazon. And we can just switch a private tenant on. One of the things that, it's very, very difficult to rewrite an old
system and give multi-tenancy and scalability. So doing that from day one, you can get much higher levels of security. So we give you out of the box really simple multi-tenancy with multi-layer security within that. So the tenant you get, only people within your company can get access to. We can switch that on in a matter of minutes. What we're able to do, everything is URL addressable within the system, and currently we're keeping it private where we have roles around things like contributors, participants, and kind of people that can just look at it. So there's currently no external URL addressability. The system, we can make that pretty simple. So if you look at the example I gave around digital asset management in the financial services, you're probably going to publish that to multiple external systems. So what we think the short-term metaphor is take that digital asset, which is an advert, which has fully approved numbers, text. You're probably going to publish that to a website, to a mobile site, to multiple other systems. That's what we believe is required by the customers we've spoken to in the short term. So you get consistent multi-channel publishing. We'll be able to store within the system's responsive design, so we can have different sizes of systems, or you can publish to Samba as a channel as well. And it will fly. So the other kind of thing we looked at there was the, behind the scenes, what we didn't expose in the interface, we audit every single thing that's happened. And you think about in this kind of environment, traditional systems audit changes to content. We can audit a team member being added, a task being added, a team member being removed. So we can give you a whole new, that's why I said this morning, this is audit on steroids, because our end goal is analytics, not audit. So we can predict what you're going to like. Are there any other questions? That's great. So we've been working with design partners for the last 9 months on this. The system's pretty hardened. So feel free to go to the website and try it. It's available on Amazon today. And we can set you up with the tenants and work with you to get your feedback as well. Thank you very much.